Good evening. My name is Sydney Winston. I am an atheist activist out of Vancouver, Canada. Otangelo Grasso is a name that is familiar to us atheists on this YouTube community, because and all credit to Otangelo, he's trying really hard to be a Darth Dawkins, to be a Gary Milne, maybe a Gary Milne 2.0. I don't think he's going to be very successful at doing that. But I wasn't even really going to do a stream tonight. However, I did come across something that Otangelo is involved in. It's on I haven't heard of this channel, or I hadn't heard of this channel before today, called TheCynicoque. TheCynicoque. It looks like it's a young Earth creationist kind of Bible-believing sort of a website. I mean, a YouTube channel. And I wanted to showcase Otangelo because he appears on this channel, and he is going to grill somebody on the evolution, on why he thinks evolution is true. So again, more fairy tales, more nonsense, more lies. You should be used to it by now, right? So without waiting any further, let's introduce our friend Otangelo, and yeah, let's take it away. Go ahead, Otangelo.
Yes, I would like to ask Andrew. Andrew, what is your main evidence for evolution? And with evolution, I mean common ancestry, universal common ancestry, and the tree of life. That is the claim that all life forms descend from one common ancestor.
Right, yeah, that's a good question. So I don't personally know too much about the chemistry of life, so I can't really speak on how the major domains are related. I do think they are related, but I can't really speak on that. So what I do think is good evidence for common ancestry in general is the fact that when you look at the traits of different organisms, you see a statistical dependence between various traits, and it mostly, for the most part, depends on where you pick them out from the phylogenetic tree. So whether you pick them out from random, or whether you pick them out from a place where you would presume they're closely related, like sister species. So that the technical term for that is what's called phylogenetic signal. It's the statistical dependence of traits based on their phylogenetic relationships. And I think in terms of that, good evidence for common ancestry in general would be the fact that when you look at the major clades of life, in particular animals, which creationists I think would say aren't necessarily related, when you look at their signal, they show a very high signal in general. So I think that is by itself good evidence that some kind of relationship exists.
I would say that if you don't have an understanding on a biochemistry level, Andrew, then you are basically empty-handed, because it's on that level that actually the mechanisms are operating actually to make all the features of differentiation of the cells. So I think that you're operating basically on a very shallow fundament, for scientific fundament. I don't think that
He can think it, but he's wrong about that.
this is a good approach.
Like if
he just made the claim. That's it. A typical Christian response.
you're talking about like genetics, for instance, I understand more about genetics, but like and the biochemistry behind how changes in genes can lead to changes in morphology. Like you mentioned, cell differentiation, but like I meant more so in terms of the chemistry of ribosomes, for instance. I have no idea about that. That's beyond my understanding right now. So that's what I meant on that.
Well, the origin of the ribosome has nothing to do with evolution, because the ribosome had to be fully operational when life started, right?
Who said?
Again, I can't really speak on that because I don't have the expertise to.
So this Otangelo is coming across as an absolute expert on biochemistry. And as an expert on biochemistry, he insists that evolution cannot take place unless all the parts that set evolution in motion, or that end up with evolution being the result, have to be present before evolution even starts to begin. Therefore, it cannot be a possibility, which is patently ignorant. I hope that, Otangelo, you're not a school teacher, because if you are, then the poor Brazilians.
That subject.
Right. I mean, I think it is staggering, Andrew, that you make the rounds on so many YouTube streams where I encounter you, and you are a very outspoken defender of evolution, and are just demonstrating that you have not an adequate scientific education in order to do that.
And you do?
Well, like if you're talking about, well, I try my best to learn about these subjects, but I can't learn about everything all at once.
Right.
Then why don't you first learn about the subjects, and when you have actually an understanding, even on...
So what are you saying, Otangelo? That you know all about evolution, you have the understanding, and you have the expertise to debunk evolution, right? From a scientific point of view. Oh, I can just see the garbage, the BS, the flotsam and jetsam that's coming.
On genetics, on biochemistry, and in special in regards of epigenetics and systems biology, and even and evolutionary biology, because it is something which is related to several fields, and it really requires many years of study in order to have even, I would say, a superficial understanding of the mechanisms which are in place. Why don't you hold up a decision or a view in regards of that topic, in regards of how organisms came and biodiversity came to be, until you actually acquire that understanding, and then say, I believe this or that is the mechanisms because this of that, and you can actually really substantiate it and remain agnostic in regards of that issue.
Well, for two main reasons, because the evidence I've accumulated so far, while not not the total amount of evidence, is still significant to convince me that some kind of evolution was there. And second, even though I don't have a complete understanding of evolution, I have talked to people or emailed them, etc., who do study these fields. And although I myself am not an expert, I think I'm going to trust the people who are experts, and most of them say that evolution is true.
Oh, okay. So now we are starting to get the real picture. You are basically operating on believing in authority without having actually an understanding yourself.
Oh, it looks to me like I am muted. And that was the most brilliant monologue I've ever given in my life. I was telling Otangelo how insignificant his point of view is when it comes to yes, I know I'm muted, sorry. I better just tell the there you go. Okay, so Otangelo, you're taking the part of in evolution. You're saying that without education, and well, without education in evolution, you have no right to talk about it, right? That's what you're saying. But at the same time, you are promoting non-evolution. You're promoting the creationism, which is zero evidence, zero, nothing, zero, like less than zero, other than conceptual in the mind. And you know, if men have figured it out and have written it down, right there it is. You can read it. You can say, "Oh, look, evolution. It's written down, and it is obviously false." But my God says that evolution cannot be true, so therefore it's got to be untrue. Otangelo, you're pissing me off with your intransigence.
No, that's not really an argument from authority.
Exactly.
Well, you just confess that you believe what your experts, those which you actually contact, what they say, and I suppose they are all. Is there one creationist amongst them?
There probably are, but it's not the majority. And when the reason that's not an argument from authority is because if I were able to specify, I would say because they're not because they are experts does not necessarily mean they are correct. Just that they are experts. I am not an expert, so I'm going to trust them in terms of these issues because they are more likely to be correct in the fact that they have studied these topics pretty much their entire lives. So it's not really an argument from authority as much as trusting your auto mechanic, for instance, because you don't know much about mechanics, but they do. You don't necessarily know that they're correct, but they're more likely to be correct just because they have expertise in that subject.
Well, I understand that you want to have an answer, and it is an important issue, of course. But I'll be honest with you. I think this is not
Otangelo, being honest?
good epistemic approach.
What do you mean by it's not a good epistemic approach? It doesn't have to be. It's a scientific approach. Science trumps your epistemics. Every single time, fucking Otangelo, every time. Epistemics.
Well, like in terms of abiogenesis or evolution, or what exactly are you talking about?
I am talking about the entire approach which you are exposing right now. I mean, I don't do that. What I do is I educate myself, even as a layman. I have no academic.
Well, I do that too.
Yeah, I don't have an academic diploma, but.
Oh, you don't have an academic diploma, but here you are taking umbrage with people who do have an academic diploma in science, no less, in evolutionary biology, no less, and you'll argue with them. There are no words to describe the depths of your ignorance, Otangelo and Gary, both of you together, are a cesspool of ignorance between the two of you.
I can actually access books about evolution and science papers about evolution and study the topic and then make up my mind.
Oh, really? Is that right? You then make up your mind. You're not going to make up your mind that God exists before you go into any discussion. In your mind, God exists, no question. There is no discussion, no debate. God exists. No evidence, just a claim, but that's where you stand. I find that very, very, very dodgy.
In regards of the topic on the issue at hand. And I mean, this is, in my understanding, the only way where you can get to a real understanding and then make up your mind.
Well, I never said I didn't do that. I look at the evidence as well, and I try to learn as best as I can. But like on the subjects that I'm not as familiar with, I need to put it in their hands until I can learn about those subjects more in depth, which of course is going to take some time.
How do you learn? How do you learn about something like, when he says learn, learning about evolution is quite simple because there are facts, you can learn them, you can digest them, you can question them, you can repeat them. But learning about evolution, you have to have an open mind. You have to allow for the possibility that evolution is actually true. Now, if there's just a small possibility that evolution is true, you have to allow for it and you have to investigate it. All right? When it comes to your higher power, that is just conceptual. There's no evidence. There's no earthly evidence. There's no natural evidence other than your imagination. So you can't come and bring your imagination and argue your imagination against empirical data, empirical science. This is what you guys are trying to do. Wasting our times. Good thing we've got time to waste.
Well, that's precisely the issue because, as I said previously, the mechanisms which are in play to construct complex organisms, they are on a biochemical level. They are in regards of genetic and epigenetic information. It is about signaling. It is about
About what?
And true is that nobody has actually still a real or even close understanding of these mechanisms.
Listen to him. Bullshit.
I have collected 43 different genetic languages and codes which are in operation, and science has probably a superficial understanding of 2 or 3 how that information is.
Did you hear that? Science has a superficial understanding as opposed to what would he call his, as opposed to creationism. Absolute understanding. There is no question about creationism. It's written in the book. It makes sense. It's obviously true, even though there's contradictions, and even though the stories don't make sense, and even though the archaeological record does not support anything in the Bible that's claimed regarding deities and people with superhuman powers. None of that is true. And another thing, Sir Otangelo, if you're going to use the Bible to try and disprove evolution, then I can use the Bible to disprove creationism just by referring to the germ theory that that is being taught to us from the Bible, because it is in the Bible, right? Nephilim Free, who you will hear from in the next day or two, has confirmed that the Bible makes evolution impossible, makes scientists the laughing stock of the world, because God deniers like me and other rational people are standing in Nephilim Free's way and in Otangelo's way of promoting ignorance and stupidity on this planet. Like, I'm really sorry, but you're just not going to get away with it. But we are going to listen, and we are going to have a grand time laughing at your bullshit.
Actually stored. But in regards of all the other epigenetic codes and languages, science doesn't have an understanding even about the code itself, what it means.
Science doesn't have an understanding about the code. So if science doesn't have an understanding of the code, number one, how do you know there's a code? And number two, do you have an understanding of the code through some other method?
And that means that science is still at the beginning, even after so many decades of study, to unravel these levels of complexity in organisms.
I think he's painting himself into a corner. Kind of seems to me.
So
yeah, sure. No one said science and the scientific process was complete by any stretch of the imagination.
It is not only not complete, but we know that organisms really change, that they adapt to the environment. We know that there is pre-programmed evolution in order for organisms to be able to survive in different environments, and they change physically, physiologically. We know that. But the big issue, which is always in dispute, which is how do we explain the origin of biodiversity, and if the tree of life and universal common ancestry is true. This issue...
Universal common ancestry, he says if it's true. How do you possibly still stick to the if it's true trope? You know, 1,000%, Otangelo, that science is facts, right? To deny science is to deny empirical facts. To deny science and to deny empirical facts takes a Christian. You, Otangelo, are a Christian. Yes, I'm accusing you of being a Christian.
Is not settled. And people like you run around and make believe that the issue is settled, and it's not.
I didn't say it was settled.
Yes,
there are
but
always details being figured out.
Yes, but you have already taken the stance that evolution is true, have you not?
It's not a stance. It's like taking a stance that I'm going to take a stance that gravity is downward pulling, All right, there's my stance. Can you take the opposite stance? That gravity is upward pulling and there's no such thing as gravity? You can't do that. You can't take science, you can't take a scientific fact and say, okay, I'm going to take a stance for it or against it. It doesn't work that way, Otangelo. This is not fairy tales. This is not biblical stories. This is not old folklore. This is reality. 21st century, Otangelo. Come on. Bring yourself back up to the 21st century. Where are you stuck? Back in the first century of the Common Era? Come on, man.
Just because there are holes in a specific theory and details being worked out doesn't mean I am agnostic to the entire theory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so basically it is an evolution of the gaps, right?
No, it's
that's a stupid thing to say, evolution of the gaps. You see, these people, they cannot think for themselves. We all know about the God of the gaps, right? Every time there's a gap and science answers it, well, there's now that's one gap filled, but there's other gaps which science hasn't answered. So there's obviously places where the Christians say that God did this, God did that, because we can't explain it through science. But the gaps over time, right? The God of the gaps 300 years ago was the gaps were like this, and then technology and scientists and all of us came together and figured out what was the real explanation for pretty much everything. And now we're about here, okay? There's your gap. That's all you got left for your God to work in. Good luck. Good luck going forward, Otangelo. I think you're going to fail.
not, because when you're looking, it's an accumulation of evidence. It's consilience of evidence. So like when you're looking at the data as a whole and you're looking to specific parts of it, when you find a piece of evidence that doesn't fit with the whole, it's something to look at, but it doesn't mean that the rest of the evidence isn't correct or anything.
Well, that is simply not true, what you are saying right now.
You see? Simply not true. He's just making a silly claim, silly assertion, because he knows that he's been uncovered. So what does he do? It's not true. Bang. I wonder if he's going to have an explanation for that. It's not true, and why. I'm waiting.
And it is not true because you have confessed that you don't know, even on a biochemistry level where actually the action happens, what it is there that happens. You have confessed that.
Sure, but I know people who do.
So you are using basically blind belief and run around making it believe.
Blind belief. You see, the guy is he's detached. He's disassociated himself from reality. He's calling the voluminous evidence for the evolutionary tale. He's calling that specious. He's saying you can look at all this evidence, which explains everything, but if you believe in God first, then you can discount the real evidence, and then you have to stick to the fake evidence that you made up in your head for your God. Even today, just thinking of the word God, it's becoming less and less significant. God, garbage, garage, grunge music, God. Just another word.
That you have actually knowledge on the matter while you are confessing right now. You don't. You just rely on information from others.
No, I learn about this stuff all the time, so it's not simply based on what I hear from others. I'm doing both, essentially.
Okay.
He's actually getting his ass kicked, Otangelo. This guy who's taking him on, I think it's It's Andrew. He's running rings around Otangelo. He's just too polite to celebrate.
I will give you a list here of 19 different mechanisms, and I want you to tell me which of those is not in operation to explain organismal complexity. Okay? 1, the gene regulation network. 2, various signaling pathways. 3, at least 43 epigenetic codes. 4, cell-cell communication. 5, chromatin dance in the nucleus. 6, post-transcriptional modifications of histones. 7, the DNA methylation code. 8, homeobox and Hox gene expression. 9, non-coding DNA, junk DNA. 10, transposons and retrotransposons. 11, centrosomes. 12.
You realize he's getting all these from science, right? None of this comes from the Bible. All from science. So he's going to take science, and he's going to explain science, and then he's going to refute science. This is how cognitively dissonant these people are. And it is so evident, so self-evident that these people are in trouble. They have emotional issues. They have cognitive issues. They have problems.
The precise arrangement of cytoskeletal arrays. 13, membrane targets. 14, ion channels and electromagnetic fields. 15, the sugar code. 16, egg polarity genes.
Where's he getting all this shit from? He's just reading something from some list?
17, hormones. 18, morphogens growth factors. And 19, the adhesion code.
What is that? What did he just say? Attention code? What is that?
One of those do you think is not involved in the construction of complex body plans?
This is his best argument?
Well, I wouldn't disagree with any of them.
Good. And you're correct. All of those are actually employed in a joint venture. Even the different
He's reading.
Signaling pathways, they work together. There are different languages in the body which can communicate.
Did you hear that? There are different languages in the body. Well, let's see. My brain speaks English. My legs obviously speak Brazilian, because I'm such a good soccer player. My arms speak American, because I'm, basketball. Different languages in the body, what the fuck?
Communicate with each other. And this, what I just exposed to you right now, goes far beyond just at the genetic level. Far beyond. And lots of it must be pre-programmed information and signaling languages. You cannot evolve these languages. But that's right, Andrew?
Well, how do you know they can't evolve?
Exactly.
The genetic code, for example, isn't even a question of evolution. It is a question of the origin of life, and you need to have it fully operational when life started, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Wait, so we were talking about evolution, and now we're talking about the origin of life. Why did we switch topics?
Well,
Why indeed?
Actually, the genetic code is fundamental and is part of evolution, right?
Yes, but that doesn't mean that the theory attempts to explain where it came from.
Okay, we have. Do you know how many different genetic codes we have?
No. I'm not a geneticist.
Okay, we have 33 different genetic codes. Okay. So we have, for example,
Okay, this is really it's boring. It is boring, but I do want to interject. I want to just bring in something that from yesterday. Remember yesterday I did a Gary Milne. What was it called? Gary Milne denies his adultery and abuse. I did that video yesterday. Now we got a comment. I got a comment from Canadian traditionalist. Listen to this. It's gonna freak you out. Canadian traditionalist. There is. See? Canadian traditionalist. He says, well, even if what you atheists say is true about Darth, then it still shouldn't matter to any of you, since there is no true objective right or wrong in your atheistic world view. I want to take a moment to read that again. Well, even if what you atheists say is true about Darth, then it still shouldn't matter to any of you, since there is no true objective right or wrong in your atheistic worldview. So Canadian traditionalist finally has come out admitting that perverted pig of a human being Gary Milne is exactly that. I just wanted to bring that back. Let you know that we are onto you, buddy. We are so onto you. Canadian Catholic. So basically, Canadian Catholic has admitted that it's true about Gary Milne. All these facts about Gary Milne are actual facts, true facts. Yeah. So I just want to bring that to your attention. We can carry on now with Otangelo and his fairy tale stories.
A different genetic code in mitochondria. Do you know that?
Well, I'm pretty sure I've at least heard that there is one or at most a few genetic codes, mainly the code from DNA to mRNA to amino acids.
I kind of almost expect him to say the genetic code of Hammurabi or something.
That's not a different genetic code.
Right, I'm saying most of the codes I've heard about, at least, are based on that one.
That has nothing to do what you just said with the genetic code. Do you know what the genetic code is, actually?
Not specifically.
Oh, why did you let Otangelo explain to you?
Okay, you see, Andrew, you can understand it on a very basic 101 biology level.
You see how he insults? Such a cunt. He's such a piece of shit, Otangelo. You really are a piece of shit.
Otangelo, if I may, just to try to help out in addressing Andrew, the crux of what Otangelo is trying to get across is that the Darwinian model.
See, somebody else has to explain what Otangelo is trying to get across, because no one understands what Otangelo is trying to get across. Let's see if this guy actually does understand, because I doubt it.
Model flies in contravention of what we know about plain statistics, mathematics, and as Dr. Hugh Ross once said, if you're going to work in the field of evolution, you have to incorporate mathematics into it. And
right.
The overwhelming problem with the Darwinian model is that the sole mechanism which accounts for genetic complexity.
Why do these people stick to the Darwinian model from 1857 or whatever? You'd think that there had been no scientific breakthroughs since 1857. I'm wondering if these creationists actually realize that science has actually been working in non-stop since 1857, and we've discovered quite a few things since 1857. Dear Christian brethren.
Complexity is random mutation, which is to say random deviation. Would you accept that?
I would say that's what generates the variation on which those structures are emerge, but I wouldn't say that's the only mechanism per se.
But you
rather,
think it is? But you think it is just on a genetic level, Andrew?
What is variation?
What provokes physiological change and evolution?
It's not all on a genetic level, but I would say most of it is. Most of the relevant variation is.
So what else is?
Well, there are things like phenotypic plasticity and epigenetic mechanisms you mentioned, but I'm not as familiar with those. I don't think that those really matter as much to evolution.
If you want to continue, otherwise I reply, Crimson Air.
I think that Otangelo's met his match here. He doesn't know what to say. He's racking his brains. Oh, how can I bring God into this? How can I dispute the facts, the empirical facts of evolution? There has to be a way. And there is a way. Just say that God exists, and 90% of the population who are stupid and ignorant will believe you. Weird.
Concerning genetic complexity, I think an important distinction to make from the start is that while you can get complexity from random changes, like if you take two buckets of paint, one blue, one white, and you toss them both onto a blank canvas, you'll get complex different patterns and shapes. Now, the differentiation is to be made between complexity and functional genetic complexity, where you have a system where each of the parts are interdependent, where if you make change to one, you have to sequentially make changes in the right order and in the right timing to all of the rest of the parts. So with random mutation, which is to say random deviation, taking away, adding on, twisting, turning, you can get periodic emergence of order, complexity. But to have it occur in such a way that you have all the mechanisms come together at once, that takes intelligence, and that's the argument that we're making. And so, like you said, you defer to the experts.
That takes intelligence. Can you see how stupid they are? They don't trust nature. Nature takes care of everything, right? We are all nature. We're all products of nature. But these people, thick Christians, who don't want to believe, who don't want to take the facts that I presented to them, the empirical facts, the science. Let's just call it the science, because science is factual data, empirical data, collected over time, massaged and reviewed and argued and presented, and eventually other scientists and then us, we figure it out. We catch on. The smart people first figure it out, and then they explain it to us, and then we say fine. But then there's the dumb fuckers, the dumb cunts of this planet, the Christians, the arrogant, narcissistic, self-entitled, crybaby Christians. And they come up with stuff like what Angelo's coming up with now. It's a travesty.
Professional proponents of evolution. What would you say is, to the best of your knowledge, the most promising aspect of evolution that can account for the absence of intelligence in the context of emerging complexity, functional complexity?
Like you're talking irreducible complexity in a sense, right?
Yes, that's right.
That's their whole
Okay.
argument.
Irreducible.
That's always their whole argument with these Christians. Okay, let me just make it really simple here for you simple Christians. Matter, energy, pretty much the same thing. We'll call it energy because I don't want to have two words for the same thing, but we'll call it energy. Now, energy is neither created and nor destroyed. Energy is. Energy is infinite. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be created because it's always been there. Okay? Simple little idea. All you got to do is say, yes, energy has always been there. The science proves it. Law of thermodynamics, first law of thermodynamics. You all, even you Christians, agree with the first law of thermodynamics. So you agree with the first law of thermodynamics, and then you come into these rooms and you totally forget that the first law of thermodynamics exists, and you run your mouth off with no credibility whatsoever, no merit, nothing.
In the sense that if you want to increase it, you have to increase it in a way that's not detrimental to the system.
Right. Well, I think one of the ways, the one I'm most familiar with, is co-option, basically. Like, no one says, for instance, that a feature with X function always necessarily had X function. It could have had Y function in the past. And in fact, when we look, and this is why I think phylogenetics is important as well, but like when we look through the animal kingdom, for instance, we can see different variations on a theme, and we can kind of connect the dots, not in terms of those particular species, but in terms of those morphologies, those structures. So like, we're not saying, for instance, A species evolved into B species, etc. We're saying that the structure in A species is reminiscent of a precursor structure that could have been co-opted into the B structure, basically. Like an example would be feathers and birds and dinosaurs, and obviously dinosaurs couldn't fly. But our current explanation is they were used for some other purpose and then were co-opted for flight. Does that make sense?
It doesn't.
It does, actually, because nothing is born, nothing evolves out of the with flight as the main target of its evolution. It just doesn't have. Yeah, flight just evolves over many millions of years, people. Many millions of years, and on the point of scientists, no scientists have said that matter was created. Every single scientist knows, and so do you, even though you deny it, that matter is infinite. Matter has never been created and can never be destroyed. That is a law, and the Christians, they cannot get their mind around it. It's a deal breaker for Christianity. If matter indeed is infinite, and there's no reason to believe it isn't, because all the evidence points to the fact that existence and matter are here to stay, and they've always been around. So I don't get where the Christians are actually going to, how the Christians are actually going to push their point forward. How are they going to somehow get the Pope to stand up and say, right, evolution is actually wrong. God exists. God is everything. God made it all. Evolution is just a figment of the scientist's imagination. Can you imagine that? Can you just imagine that? But that is kind of what the Christians are saying right now. And another point: if some Christians accept evolution, then I would like to find out from them how evolution and creationism intersect. At what point did one overtake the other? It is my argument that creationism is nonsense. It's a myth. It's a irrational concept, nothing else. How, in the creationist mind, does the the model of creationism and the fact of evolution, how do they merge? They don't. They can't. We know this. Christians, you are defeated.
These are
Well, if you take the similar structure aspect and if you run with that, then what you're basically saying is that, well, first I would say that you're making an inference where creationists will look at it as common design, and an evolutionist can look at it as a common structure. But that doesn't overcome the problem of genetic complexity, where, like you said, with feathers, you could have that passed on from one species to another and change. But in addition to that, you have an entire host of other genetic features that you have to accommodate in changing all of those along with it in order to have a harmonious functioning system being the end result.
Right,
so
right.
Instead of just feathers, you would have to say feathers, the genes that help initiate the divergence of the bone structures in the development of the feathering, the feather growth process, and everything else that is tied in with that from one generation to the next, and adding in changes, adding in small changes here and there throughout the entire system, and still have that being a coherent functioning system many generations down the line.
Right.
So Andrew, let me ask you something. In order to go from a unicellular eukaryotic organism to a multicellular organism, you need to specify the differentiation of the cells. Like a neuron is completely different than a blood cell or any other kind of cell, right? Like
correct.
Okay, so do you know what is involved in order to make that differentiation?
What is what has all this got to do with the science? All Otangelo is doing is taking the science, the confirmed science, for that matter, and questioning it, putting it into disrepute, if you will. He's got no basis to do this. So it would have to lead me to believe that Otangelo is following in Gary Milne's footsteps in trying to become a YouTube Christian apologist personality. That's what I think. I think he's in competition with your friend Gary. Christians, maybe you guys should have a vote. Who should represent Christianity, Otangelo or Gary? Put your votes in the side chat. Tell me who you want.
Whole subject of embryology, cells communicating with one another, basically.
Okay, let me give you a list here. Explaining organism form, I will read here. Explaining organism form depends on explaining how organs, tissues, and cells form and gain shape. On the lowest level of the hierarchy, the formation of cells in a multicellular organism depends on the specification of 1. The morphogenesis of eukaryotic cells, structure and shape. 2. Cell fate determination and differentiation, that is the phenotype or what cell type each one will become. 3.
You see, in discussions like this, there's absolutely no reason to get so stupidly specific, Otangelo. You don't have a very good grasp of what you're talking about, considering your presupposition, okay? So it's very difficult for us to sit here and listen to you reading off a list of whatever the hell you're reading, spewing little bits of information that either make sense or don't make sense, but it's irrelevant. Nothing you say will define your God into existence, will define anything you think conceptually into existence. So you can go on and on and on with these little nitpicking bullshit details. But all you're doing is delaying your inevitable demise. Christianity's inevitable demise. It's not going to be long. You think you got the upper hand, Christians, but you don't.
The cell growth and size. 4. The development and cell division counting. Cells need to be programmed to stop self-replicating after the right number of cell divisions. 5. Mechanisms of pattern formation. 6. Hox genes. 7. Position and place in the body. This is crucial. Limbs like legs, fins, eyes, etc. must be placed at the right place. 8.
Okay, so eyes and lips and whatnot have to be placed at the right place. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle, he's saying. So God has got his little jigsaw puzzle with these little pieces, and he's putting the nose and the eyes and the ears and the arms and the torso and everything right in its place, just like by design. That's how it works. But let me tell you, if Otangelo is telling the truth about this God thing designing us and everything else in this universe, I just want to tell you, Otangelo, you've picked a very piss poor designer to hang your hat on. Horrible, horrible work, terrible work. In fact, if I were God's employer, I would fire him. Not up to the job. Useless.
It requires to communicate with other cells and the setup of the communication channels. 9. Sensory and stimuli functions of the cells. 10. What specific new regulatory functions do cells have to acquire? 11. When will the development program of the organism express the genes to new cells to development? 12. Change regulation in the composition of the cell membrane and or secreted product.
He doesn't have the personality, does he? Like he's standing there reading shit that he should know already at the top of his head. Look what Gary did. Gary Mill went and learned Greg Bonson. He learned Greg Bonson back to front. And then when he comes into his shouting sessions, he screams and shouts Greg Bonson's nonsense. But he doesn't read it from a list. He knows it. So, Otangelo, you need to spend some time practicing your fairy tale nonsense. Don't read from a list. It's boring. It shows that you don't really know your stuff, which is not a big surprise.
13. Specification of the cell-cell adhesion proteins and which ones will be used in each cell to adhere to the neighbor cells. There are 4 classes. 14. Apoptosis, programming of the time period the cell keeps alive in the body and when it is time to self-destruct and be replaced by newly produced cells of the same kind.
There's a science way of explaining that. Honestly, minuscule detail by minuscule detail is explained by science. What are you trying to do, Otangelo? Are you trying to change the subject? Are you trying to say, well, God does exist? I can't acknowledge that because my position is that God doesn't exist, but evolution and everything proves that God doesn't exist. But I'm Otangelo and I have to take a position, otherwise Darth Dawkins is going to scream at me, and if he screams at me, I'm going to start crying because I'm Otangelo. Pretty pathetic.
15. Set up each cell-specific nutrition demands. 16. Cell shape changes. 17. Cell proliferation is the process that results in an increase in the number of cells and is defined by the balance between the cell divisions and cell loss through cell death and differentiation. And 18. Differences in regulatory DNA. So you see there are several items here which depend on specified and information which has to be treated all at once in order to change.
I bet you everybody else in that hangout is fallen asleep. Literally not listening to him. I don't think anyone here is listening to him. I'm certainly not listening to him. He's just droning on and on and on about God knows what.
A cell and specify it. And you cannot do that gradually. It has to be injected all at once. And there are things like, for example, signal cell-cell communication and cell adhesion has to merge simultaneously. Because if you have, for example, cell-cell signaling and communication, but the cells do not stick together, there is no deal. And the inverse is as well the same problem. If they stick together, but there is no communication, no deal. So this means that there are many processes here which have to merge together. And if one is lacking or missing, no deal. So that is actually something which also depends on.
So you're basically saying that if they don't evolve once, then a morphological structure can evolve?
Yes, there has to be an injection of a huge quantity of information right from the beginning, and also the information which permits the or even single cell to adapt to the environment. And there is a little bit of natural selection and the commonly used evolutionary mechanisms. They play a role, but they play a minor role. The most of the adaptation and plasticity, which you mentioned, it is pre-programmed.
Well, I think we have structures that have we found genetic differences such that we know how these structures evolve. We have examples of morphological structures evolving even with the things you mentioned. For instance, like a good example would be the ducks. Oh, am I echoing? Oh.
Yeah, I know what you want to say. I mean, secondary speciation, this isn't the dispute here. What we are disputing is primary speciation, which is the new emergence of new features like photosynthesis, for example, which is extremely complex. It depends on 26 protein.
So what, Otangelo? Listen to you. You blabbering on and on and on, not making your point at all. God has got nothing to do with what you're saying. Nothing.
Complexes which have to work in a joint venture together, and it had to emerge right at the beginning. The first cells that the science is describing are cyanobacteria, which supposedly emerged 3.7 billion years ago, right at the beginning of the evolutionary timeline. And science doesn't have an explanation how photosynthesis evolved, precisely because of that integrated necessity.
Well, I think
Did you hear that? You actually hear that? Integrated necessity. You know, they come up with these words that they're buzzwords, meaning absolutely nothing, but they sound good.
I think that has been addressed by other people, but what you said new features, for instance, and I don't think new in this context has any real meaning, because when you're talking about evolution, you can't build something out of nothing.
Well, that is precisely what you would actually have to explain. For example, if you take the supposed universal common ancestor, it was living in a anaerobic environment without oxygen. Okay.
Is that true?
Okay. Now, the interesting thing is that
I don't think it's true.
The first cells which we know of, which are cyanobacteria, they produce oxygen, right?
Well, this sounds like all science to me. This got where's the theology, Otangelo? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to say? You're getting absolutely fucking boring. I've got a good mind to speed this up or shut it down because you're not making any headway whatsoever. You're creating atheists, Otangelo. Is that your objective? Was that your aim when you came online into this chat room, was to create atheists? Because if it was, you're doing well. If not, huge fail. I'll give you a couple more minutes, but don't put us to sleep anymore. Just stop.
Produce oxygen, but
Yeah.
there are many proteins which are shoot up if they are exposed to oxygen. So it would have killed the cyanobacteria if there wouldn't be protective mechanisms, right?
This is nonsense. This is absolute shit. You know, it would be a lot better for me to introduce Aaron Ra's series on evolution and explaining it, because he does an excellent job of taking it right from the very beginning and explaining it in point form all the way up. And these Christians, they run away from Aaron Ra like he's made it a garlic. I just want to also, I've been watching the chat, and I noticed a little bit ago there was a whole bunch of yeah, let me bring it in. Hold on a second. Let me be inclusive. Okay, so here we have, I'm going to go up here a bit, and I noticed at some point that a whole bunch of these Christians started jumping in with their crap. Jesus is Lord came in, God TV radio live show by Brett Keane came in, logical, plausible, probable came in. Who else came in? Okay, that was the, looks like that was the posse that came in all together, all at once. Couldn't get their agenda through, couldn't get their God agenda through, because nobody fucking cares about it, and so they left to go and harass somebody else. Hopefully not, but I'm sure they do, because that's what they do. Let's carry on.
From the beginning, to protect these proteins from oxygen.
Hurry. Should I make this faster?
And this is a paradox which science has no explanation
Let's
for.
try.
Well, we're talking about new features, and you kind of changed the subject to, well, this feature.
That's what I'm talking about. At the first life form, which was that supposed the universal common ancestor, it didn't photosynthesize. But the first life form that science describes are cyanobacteria 3.7 billion years ago. And these were photosynthesis.
Hold on a second. 3.7 billion years ago? Seriously, Otangelo? If you're a creationist, how do you get to 3.7 billion years ago? If the whole if the whole of existence is only 10,000 years old? That's a little bit of a problem for you guys, isn't it?
Performing organisms. So you have to explain in a very short period of interval from an anaerobic organism at the beginning of life until the first described unicellular cyanobacteria, and in that period, that evolution of higher photosynthesis complex.
Crap.
Okay.
Crap.
And you can search the scientific literature, and you will see that there will be assertions, but no really scientific explanations.
Okay, so now science makes assertions and doesn't provide explanations, according to Otangelo. This is getting pathetic. Otangelo, you've let me down. I really thought you were going to come up with something, smart, genius almost. But it turns out that you're just a wet rag. I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed.
You're roboting a bit.
Yeah, you're roboting.
There are no precursors for oxygenic photosynthesis.
That's
Well,
nonsense.
I'm pretty sure there are, because I know people have talked to you about this. But I myself...
Maybe people have talked with me about the topic, but even Robert Blankenship, which is one of the leading authorities, he has written books.
I've noticed that this guy Otangelo, Gary Milne, Nephilim Free, they bring up names of people that they're referring to for one reason or another, and never, ever, ever do we recognize these names. You just mentioned some Blankenship person. I've never heard of a scientist or anybody Blankenship who's famous for doing anything in science, but he's going to bring him up as a source for his nonsense, for a source for his garbage.
On photosynthesis, he confesses that it is a mystery for science how photosynthesis could have evolved.
Is that right? And if it is a mystery for science, which I'm sure it was at some point, what happens when they unravel the mystery? What are you going to say then? Oh, okay, well, if the mystery of photosynthesis has been unraveled by science, that proves that God does not exist. That's essentially what you've got to say, okay, Otangelo. Now, you're treading a very thin line. You're walking on very thin ice when it comes to these kinds of claims. I just want to let you know, you might fall right through.
Right, and mysteries are what science fills in.
Exactly.
So basically, a science of the gaps or a naturalism of the gaps, right?
No, naturalism of the gaps isn't really a thing.
But you expect that a natural explanation which doesn't require intelligence will be found, right?
Okay, so imagine...
Okay, answer my question. Do you expect that? That's what you expect, right?
Okay, repeat the question.
You expect that science will find a naturalistic explanation which will not require intelligence operating to instantiate photosynthesis, right?
Yes, obviously. Obviously. What a question. What a stupid question. Jesus Christ.
I don't think we expect nor not expect that.
I'm asking what you think. What do you believe? Do you believe that science will find an answer and no designer will be required?
I think that's a different question, though.
Okay, so can you answer, please?
Why'd you answer this? Just say no designer will be required because there's no God. Just say it. Don't be scared.
Okay, which question do you want me to answer? Because the first question you were asking was science would expect or not expect this. And now you're asking, would I expect or not expect this? So
Yes,
which question am I answering?
Yes, you. What do you expect? Do you believe that science will find an explanation in regards of it?
Sure, but that's not indicative of what science does overall.
Yes, but you believe that science will find a naturalistic explanation.
Yes, absolutely. We know it. There's no belief here. It's a known thing that science does find explanations. That's the only way, Otangelo, that we find explanations through science. Praying doesn't work, does it? How did you think we discovered germ theory? Through science? Or through ancient folklore fairy tales? I think it's science, modern science. And I still want you, Otangelo, to explain to me how come God did not prepare us for the parasites of viruses and bacteria. How come germ theory wasn't uncovered for us in the Bible so that we could survive the last couple of thousand years relatively unscathed thanks to the Bible?
Right?
But,
Yes, again, but that's not indicative of how the scientific process works. I am not the scientific process.
You are not the scientific process, but you agree that intelligence.
Otangelo is making a major error here by saying that photosynthesis, that science has no idea how photosynthesis works. That is a glaring error which in time, maybe sooner rather than later, Otangelo will come to regret. And I hope he has the balls to come onto the Sydney Winston channel in a live stream and admit that he is wrong and science was right all the time.
Would be a possible explanation, right?
It's always a possible explanation.
Okay, so what would you expect in order to say, oh, what we see here is better explained by design?
Well, that would have to be. Let's see. Well, I don't think. Well, in terms of things like biology, for instance, where we have, I don't think that's a settled question because we have mechanisms involved by which they can change. So I don't know if the design aspects we use for archaeology, for instance, would necessarily apply there. So I don't know.
We are not talking about archaeology. We are talking about biochemistry and biology.
Right. I'm saying I don't know how it would apply.
Yeah. So
I'm not sure.
So you see, in order for you actually to make up your mind in that entire discussion and debate of evolution to versus creationism, you would actually first to understand what the range of possibilities for unguided, non-intelligent mechanisms to instantiate versus what only intelligence can do.
Well, that's easy. The range of possibilities of what intelligence can do that doesn't exist is zero. Zero. See? Zero. Get it? Zero. That's zero possibilities. From zero evidence, from zero records, from zero contemporary archaeological records. Zero. That's the sum total of your God. Zero.
And then look into the evidence and then actually compare in order to understand, okay, here we have a feature which it seems evolution or natural mechanisms is capable to explain. Oh, here we have a feature. Wow, here is lots of information. Here is genetic codes. We see here proteins which are not working by themselves. They need to be integrated in the entire process. What does that lead to?
It leads to the fact that we have a mystery to solve.
And you
Exactly.
think that there will be a threshold where you will be justifyingly where you will say justifyingly, okay, this seems to be a feature which only intelligence can explain?
Well, it depends on what kind of intelligence we're talking about.
No,
Are we talking about a supernatural intelligence?
Yeah, just intelligence. It doesn't matter to qualify or to
Hold on.
explain intelligence.
Bullshit. What kind of intelligence are we talking about? Supernatural intelligence? Or it doesn't matter what intelligence. This is what Otangelo says. I was trying to honestly ask a question, like a real proper question. Supernatural intelligence or Natural intelligence. What? Otangelo says, oh, it doesn't matter. Okay, this is not going to end well.
Origin. It is only about if you see something in nature which you know this is something which only an intelligent agency is capable to instantiate. Natural, unguided, non-intelligent mechanisms are not capable of instantiating this.
Hey, quick question. Does anybody know who LPP's Unicorns is? Is that actually LPP himself, or is that somebody else?
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Okay, he says it is him, actually. All right.
If he wants to come in.
What's up, everybody?
How's it going?
Hey, pretty good. Great debate. Nice
Oh,
done,
yes.
TJ.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
There you go. Introduce you to
Yeah,
everybody.
it's always fascinating to me, and I think what's happening between Andrew and Otangelo is, further indication of this. Like, it doesn't matter what level of expanse you go into regarding addressing of concerns, providing evidence, rational arguments, logic, whatever it may be. It's always going to be there's some other explanation. It doesn't matter whether or not you are providing the more plausible, comprehensive argument. There must always be an escape hatch. Therefore, I'm going to ignore everything. I mean, that's all it boils down to.
I'm not.
Plausible? What do you mean by plausible? Science is not a plausible thing. Science just is. Science is correct. Plausible.
Doing that. I'm not
I
saying
think
there is another
I think you do, Andrew. I listened to you for so long already, for over a year, I think, and I don't think you are honestly open-minded to consider the design hypothesis.
The design hypothesis. You have to be open-minded to consider the design hypothesis, apparently. Okay? You can't be convinced that God doesn't exist just based on the evidence, based on the facts of life. You have to be open-minded to nonsense. You have to be open-minded to garbage entering your head. You have to be open-minded to being indoctrinated and brainwashed by Christian dogma. That's what he's trying to say. He's trying to save Christianity. He's not trying to do anything else. Even though Christianity is on its last legs and going bye-bye.
Hey, so Otangelo, have you seen the paper that came out this year about how they have just now actually sequenced the entirety of chromosome 8?
No.
This came out April 17th, I believe it was. And so all the bovine scatology we hear ad nauseum from the Evo atheists about how, like, the DNA has been completely sequenced and there is no differentiation. All that standard talking point. Oh, yeah, then if that's the case, then why this year, April of 2021, is there a paper coming out, the entire point of which, we've now actually sequenced chromosome 8, as an example. And then other papers from saying...
So advancements in science to a Christian is not good news. It's a reason to ridicule. Advancement in science, proving something. That doesn't happen in Christianity. How can it happen in science? Doesn't make sense.
Same group, going back to like 2017, 2018, where they were actually doing full-scale comparisons of the... And Otangelo, you've heard me actually raise this question before. It was very fascinating when I found this paper. The point of just because you might have a sequence, is the actual position in the chromosome important?
So these are Christians taking up a position on genome sequencing science and whatnot. I don't believe them for 1 second. I would never, ever believe anything that a creationist says if they are trying to explain science. They know not what they speak of. They know nothing about science. They haven't spent 1 minute of their lives in deep thought. Not 1 minute. And it shows. It shows. And it shows primarily in Christians, because Christians do the least amount of thinking. You know why that is? Because Christianity has nothing to offer other than empty promises. Not only are they offering empty promises, humanity is so stupid that the same empty promises that were promised 2,000 years ago, that were to be fulfilled within the lifetime of those receiving these promises, those promises were not fulfilled, were not kept, nor for the next generation, neither for the generation after that. In fact, up until today, I don't know how many generations we are removed from 2,000 years ago, they still relying on this promise being kept. This is how ridiculously ignorant Christianity is, and those who follow it blindly. Christians, I invite you, step out of the dark, come into the glorious light. That's what I learned from Mr. Batman. Step out of the dark and come into the glorious light.
And relevant, and is it different between, say, chimps and humans? And guess what? Turns out that now they're doing more comprehensive analysis. It turns out there's dramatic differences in the actual organization, the structural organizations of chromosomes, and where the actual different, the functional components are. Now, there are some.
But so what? So fucking what? Science doesn't ask you for permission to do things in a certain way. Science just happens naturally. You guys seem to be so dumbfounded.
Some similarities, but there's also massive differences.
Yes, it's not only that, John, but we are talking also about the spliceosome, which,
Spliceosome?
For example, we humans have 20,000 genes, and there are 300 different ways to splice the gene to have different protein species and products. And we are talking also about, as you are saying now, how actually the information is expressed and the gene regulatory network. And you can have the 98% of similarity between chimps and humans. It doesn't matter, because what makes actually the physical body, there are so many different epigenetic signaling. And
so he's saying that we might have similarities with apes, but we do not have a common ancestor. That's essentially what Otangelo is going to go. That is probably the weakest argument I've ever heard. In fact, I've heard enough. I absolutely heard enough for tonight. I can't take this anymore. I can't listen to this nonsense. This is pure garbage coming out of Otangelo. So I'm going to go to my friends in the window here in the side chat. I was going to ask you, Henry Hansen. Oh, a whole bunch of you said. What is SFT? Something theory. SFT. What does it stand for? Something field theory? I don't know. I have no idea. Somebody let me know. I don't really think I want to carry on listening to this nonsense anymore. It's convinced me that Otangelo is just another bloviating bitch for Jesus, or whoever his God du jour is. So, would anybody like to have a conversation and join the room? Why don't I just make a room on the off chance that somebody joins? What do you think? Just for fun, huh? Just for fun and giggles. Now, Christians, if you come into this room, I suggest that you shut up and just listen. None of your preaching will be tolerated. Okay? And it just so happens that I do have a room set up. All right, you can come in here, please. I don't mind, but no preaching, because preachers are not welcome. Christian preaching is of the devil. We do not put up with it. All right, so I'm going to pin it to the top here. I am going to switch over to the room, if I can figure it out. That one, and get rid of that one. Get rid of... How about that one there? Ooh, there we go. Nice. All right, we've got a room going. Here it is. If you want to join, now's the time. I'll keep it open for a couple of minutes and see who comes in, if anyone. And if no one comes in, then we'll call it a night. But in the meantime, I'm going to stick it over here. Okay? Anyone? 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 What happened to those Christians who were in here earlier? I guess they, even if they're still in the chat, they won't come in. They're scaredy cats. I don't blame them, because they know they have no argument. They know they are wrong. They're just trolls. Christians are trolls, you know that? Thanks, El. Oh, you're in Australia, right? That's okay. Let me take you back to the room to show you how busy it is. As you can tell, no one has joined. But I'll give it a couple more minutes, because we do have a room up. Oz will jump in a minute. Thank you, Oz. That'll be nice. I'll just make it nice and comfortable for you. There you go. Dead silence sucks. Jill came in to talk shit, then left? Yeah. Of course. He's a coward. They're all cowards. Christians are cowards. Do you really think that the first letter of Christianity being a C and the first letter of coward being a C, do you think that's just pure coincidence? I think not. I think that is designed. But no, they won't come in because they're cowards. Is coward and Christian, is that like redundant? Because all Christians are cowards. Not all cowards are Christians, but all Christians are cowards. And there's a head coward, like the big Pumbaa of cowards. And that's Gary Milne. All right, I'm giving you 60 seconds. I'm sorry, but dead air is not my friend. Not the internet's friend either. So let's hear some nice Renaissance music. All right, go. Okay, boys. Play it again, Sam. Play it again. Okay. I think that's we've waited long enough for people to jump in, and they, as you can see, they haven't. Oh, Oz is coming in. Come on, Oz. Let's take this up to another level. Just don't forget, when you come in, you need to turn off your you need to mute the YouTube stream, otherwise you'll be hearing yourself twice. Here comes somebody. Hello. Okay, let me get myself off the screen here.
Hello.
Hello. I'm just trying to remove myself and make everybody look normal. Hold on a sec. Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. Now, I need to get myself on camera, don't I? Alright, give me a second and I shall do that. Toot sweet.
I'm not going on camera.
You don't have to. You don't have to. It's okay. I will see if this works. It's working. Welcome. Excellent. Hello, Oz.
What's up? What's up?
Welcome to the show. Did you catch
Thanks
any...
for having me.
Hey, no problem. No problem. You're welcome anytime. But did you catch what Otangelo was bullshitting about?
Yeah, a good chunk of it, but usually it has to do with proteins, and more proteins and proteins.
Yeah, and proteins prove God. You see?
Well,
Have you noticed?
yeah, what?
Yeah, if proteins prove God.
That's what my my personal trainer back when I used to work out all the time, he was like, if you have the right intake of proteins, you will then find out that God is real and you'll bulk up.
So there's a middleman between the proteins and you bulking up. Fucking hell.
I guess in my world, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so what is your experience?
I was doing the Bible all wrong.
Yeah. What's your experience, Oz, with these people, with these cowardly Christians?
So with the likes of Otangelo, Mr. Batman, actually you I think a week or two you played a bit where I went head to head with Batman and he had no idea what to do with my argumentation.
Not surprising.
And Darth and so on. It was, to me it's at this point it's just entertainment.
Yeah.
Like it's I listen or I partake just based on being entertained, because there's no, being a Christian for 30 years and
wow.
And really chasing a relationship with God. When I hear these folks talk about Christianity, when I hear these folks, I'm like, you're so far removed from what the book actually talks about, right? And that's not to do a no true Scotsman, but what they talk about and what they're doing has nothing to do with what the book talks about. None, zero, nada.
I agree, absolutely agree. So what is their agenda then? Like what's the purpose if they've got no substance? So what are they?
It's one word.
What are they appealing to?
It's one word. Ego.
Ego. Yeah. I think you nailed
it's
it.
Ego. They love to hear themselves talk,
Mm-hmm.
and they love to feel like they're defeating someone. It's about trying to defeat someone, because if they were really in accordance to their book, it's not about defeating. It's about compelling people to believe in the God of their book, right, and to make disciples, and to be a witness to the truth and the love of the God of that book. And we can all agree when we listen to these folks talk,
Mhm.
that doesn't appear to be or sound like it's the agenda.
Hello, Troy. Welcome.
Hi.
Hello. How's your audio?
So that, yeah.
Hi there. Hi, Troy.
All right. Sorry.
Hello.
Hey, Troy. Are you with us? Oh,
I am, but I'm not.
I was getting ready to say the same thing.
Okay. Cool.
I'm here. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can hear you fine.
Okay.
And I always say, I'm here, but I'm not all there. So we got that going for us.
Probably the same for all of us, right? Sorry, we cut you off, Oz.
No, you're good. I was just saying it was actually a shock to my system when I deconstructed and then deconverted and left
30
faith.
years? 30 years, really?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I'm only 4 years. Yeah, 4 years removed from religion, and it was actually more of a shock. To be honest, it was more of a shock to my system to hear the internet / YouTube arguments for Christianity than it was anything I heard from an atheist. Mm-hmm. The just nonsensical, just scattered everywhere arguments that did not actually point to the God of the Bible. I was like, that's not what we did. That's not what we did. That's not what we said. Like, who are these people? Like, that was a bigger shock to my system than anything an atheist ever said to me.
Yeah. 30 years though. Oh my God. Did you actually preach it, or did you just believe it?
Oh no, I was. So my brother, the city I live in, my brother is still the pastor of about an 800 member church here in the city that we live in, and I was essentially full-time minister with him. I was a full-time drummer, oversaw all the small groups, youth group. I did all of the inner city ministry. Yeah, man, I was not just a holiday Christian. I was
Wow.
I was in it to win it.
That's hardcore. I've never been in a big church like that.
Wow. But you survived. You should
I'm here, man.
grab Otangelo and Gary and explain to them the facts of life.
Well, both of them I've tried to have conversations with, and they it's funny. Darth hates me because I don't do all the semantics. I don't.
You don't play his game.
I drilled down to, is there a God? And you need to demonstrate there's a God, and he hates it. And
Yeah, he does.
one of the guys I know, Tom Rabbit posted it. He asked about me in specific, and Darth was like, Oz is one of the most dishonest, disingenuous, unintelligent,
Of course.
yada yada yada. It went down to and I was like, damn, bro, I got under your skin that much after like 3 or 4 conversations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you already formed that kind of opinion, but when you back them down into scripture, and if you get somebody that is has a solid grasp on scripture, the history, the history of the text. They start to scramble, and then they turn it into they try to gaslight.
Yep.
They try to gaslight
Yep.
and push you into another conversation, another argument, and that's what sucks. And that's part of what I was talking about when I first started to, or when I left religion and started to become involved in the YouTube and online religious conversations or debates. I was like, holy shit. Like, there's not all, but there's so many of these Christians that think they have these great arguments. That doesn't prove God, bro. That does not prove God. What the fuck are you talking about?
It proves that they got a big ego, like you said.
Yeah. And when you have to over talk, and I'm not just talking about one or two. I'm talking as a whole, of any group, any conviction, any belief. When you get to the point where you have to overtalk, you have to dominate a conversation. You have to dominate dialogue. It shows that you have a lack of confidence because you have to control. You have to control it because you know if it goes one way or the other, you probably can't. You probably can't defend it. You probably can't back it up. So you feel like you have to control the narrative and the direction of that conversation the entire damn time. And that's a huge signal to me that you're not confident. You're not actually confident. You just want to stay in control.
Right. It's all about control. The whole narcissism thing, this whole religion is based on narcissism. It was written by narcissists, so you'd think that it would follow that everything that derives from the original inventors of this nonsense would be narcissistic, and it is, especially when it comes to their treatment of women. Just look at the way they treat women in Christianity.
It's disgusting.
I can't for the life of me understand how one woman on this planet accepts Christianity. It's beyond me. I can't understand how one Native American accepts Christianity. I can't understand how one black person accepts Christianity.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, I don't. And shout out to my boy, Dr. Josh. He now has two books out now. As if you were, at least in the United States, if you are if you're a minority and you don't read those two books and walk away like, I can't buy into this book anymore, meaning the Bible, then I mean this. I'm not being sarcastic. I have an amazing therapist I want you to talk to, and I mean that with every fiber of my being. Right. Because if you can go through the actual critical historical examination of the text and walk away and say, like, I'm cool with that, it's no longer about us talking about a belief. Like, I really want to connect you with professionals. Like, it's genuinely how I feel.
Well said. I think you're right. All these people need help of some kind. I mean, for us to sit here and ridicule them and mock them and laugh at them is one thing. But at the end of the day, they do need help.
Yeah, absolutely. And like on our website, if you go to tart.live, we have a part of our page that's dedicated. It says Tart helps.
Tart, okay.
And yeah, Tart. So we start out as the Atheist Roundtable, and we left the domain the same because so many people know about it. But it's the Atheist Network Group now. Okay. But Tart.live, there's a section there. It's Tart helps, and we direct you to either like a singular therapist or to like the secular secular therapy project or. Yeah. There's so many different places we can send people to get the help that they need if they're really seeking that out and they want that help. And I think that's important, you know, and it was important for me. Like I still talk to my therapist all the fucking time. And one of my biggest, I guess, roadblocks coming out of faith and out of Christianity was the threat of hell. Mm-hmm. And even, you know, 2 years into it as an atheist, I would have nightmares. I'd have nightmares of, if I die, is this what happens to me? And I would have nightmares of burning in hell, because that was drilled into my brain from the time I was, my earliest memories, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old. That's all I was ever told. You know, and so I had to reprogram or reformat my brain to understand that, that's not normal.
No, that's abusive. That's hugely abusive.
Yeah, there's tons of trauma there. Yeah.
What parents don't do to their children, huh? Hey, Jefferson, welcome.
Howdy. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I can kind of back up what he's saying there, because you know, raised in Christianity when I was a kid, you know, I was raised, you know, all my first memories growing up, when my parents were in their 20s, that was their jam, was their kind of fundamentalist Christian group, and it was a non-denominational thing, so they'd go through different dogmas and stuff, and with varying degrees of intensity, and so we would run into things where they'd be on a health kick for 6 months, and then they'd switch, and it was all about the satanic panic, and then the next 6 months it would be about sexual purity. So it was kind of all over the place. And when we finally, that one kind of blew up and we got into a more conservative one, as I started to go through puberty and stuff, I started having these anxiety issues about, you know, it's like, how do you square, it's something that I bring up with Christians quite a bit, but how do you square sexual feelings that you're having, you know, with anything other than sin, if all you know is this theological doctrine that you are born depraved, these are horrible things, don't act on them, you know. Well, if you don't act on them, you get blue balls, you know. Yep. So it's like, this isn't healthy, this isn't realistic, it doesn't track. So you just end up going through these weird, it's almost like being an addict. You go through these weird cycles of like guilt and repentance and purity and elation, and it's sort of like a self-perpetuating you actually kind of become a victim to your own Stockholm syndrome. It's weird.
Yeah, I don't know how, and he doesn't have to say it live. I'm almost 40, but for me, everything he just shared, that's exactly what I experienced. Like there was like Acquire the Fire when I was a teenager. Acquire the Fire with Ron Luce, and it was you went and you felt the conviction of the Holy Spirit, and there was the purity culture. And when you go home, you need to remove all CDs, all the music, all the movies, and you need to connect with your youth pastor, because you're going to go behind the building and you guys are going to have a drum, a metal drum, and you're going to burn all of this music and you're going to do away with it. And that goes back to the satanic panic, what Jefferson was talking about, and there were so many other facets to that, but that's exactly how I grew up. It was just this constant, like, if you're doing this, it's a sin.
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with human nature. It has nothing to do with human nature. It's a sin.
When it comes to conversations, when Christians start getting into these ideas about, well, they want to get into a discussion about how they deal with homosexuality in the church, the question I always ask them, if I get an opportunity, is like, okay, for you, is gay a verb or is it an adjective? Like, do you believe in sexual orientation, or do you think that, you know, gay is just something that people do? And the odd thing about this is very few of them think about this deeply, but I find their answers very dishonest, because what they'll usually be like, no, if you act on homosexual urges, then that's the sin. Like, okay, then why is it that when I was growing up, and I'm straight, vanilla straight cisgender male, I was told in any Christian context that certain feelings and thoughts were bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden, for some of these Christians, like, no, it's not the thoughts and the feelings and the urges that convict you. That's not what's going to get you. It's whether you act on them or not. And I'm like, well, that's a far cry away from where I was. And depending on which gospel you read, it's very different because, you know, there's the whole thing in Matthew where just thinking that thought, thinking about having sex with your neighbor's wife is adultery in your heart.
Yes, Jefferson, thank you. That's exactly
That's horrible.
If you didn't hit it, what I was going to hit is, even if you, and then this is where, and God, I love Hitch. Even you think of it, even if you think of it, you have now desecrated yourself and your future spouse, or what they try to at least the right leaning Christians in America, they try to take it to so many different degrees where it's you didn't just think about it. Now you essentially acted on it. You acted upon it.
Mike Winger flakes on that question quite a bit. I remember watching a thing where he was, I think it was from last year. I think Pine Creek did a thing on it, and Mike Winger did a thing featuring like a kind of a country music singer, and she's sort of a crossover. I guess she maybe started in adult contemporary Christian music and then was kind of getting kind of popular with country pop. And she was asked about this because she's a professed believer, born again Christian, and then she was asked like, "Hey, how do you feel about homosexuality and all this kind of stuff?" And she kind of gave a very political answer, like, I'm not knowledgeable enough about it, and I'm still learning as a Christian kind of thing, and just kind of begged off the whole thing. And then Mike Winger tries to go into it, and he kept kind of contradicting himself because he couldn't kind of like thread that line. Like, he wants to do the whole, well, it's the sin that we hate, not the sinner. It's like, no. If you believe in the notion that, if you hear that from a Christian, simply ask them if they believe in reprobates. If they believe in the concept of a reprobate, that is the notion of hating the sin because of the sinner, because they've become sin.
Yeah.
So, that's all you got to do to poke that little bubble. And it's like, okay, now that we know where you stand on that theological doctrine, let's rewind this back so that you can reset your bullshit story.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and but what you just said there is absolutely true. And not your online like YouTube Christians, but your average, day-to-day Christians, when you bring that up, they do struggle. They do struggle with that because they're not spending every day on YouTube or online listening to arguments and all of those things, and that is part of the conversation where they do get caught up.
Yeah,
they get stuck, and I don't know if you were listening before, Jefferson, before you jumped on, but that was one of my, like, I want to say aha moments, but also like, oh shit moments when I left faith and left religion, is I was actually more caught off guard by the Christian argumentation or lack thereof on YouTube and online than I was the atheist argument. Like I was like, what are these people talking about?
Yeah, that was a weird thing for me because, like, when I kind of got into it, I read Hitchens and Sam Harris, and I never really got into Dawkins very much. I never read one of his books, but I read a little bit of Daniel Dennett. And some of the arguments I liked, and some of them I didn't. And I had followed Hitchens before he'd gotten into the atheism thing. I'd read his stuff politically, and I agreed with some and disagreed with other stuff. But when I started reading the stuff on that, some of the arguments that he'd presented, it wasn't stuff that I'd ever been exposed to as a Christian in church. And I thought some of the arguments he was bringing up, some of the points he was bringing up, were really interesting because they were challenges that. And I think this is all downplayed by a lot of YouTube atheists because they'll just be like, no, Hitchens just gives. These are just atheist talking points, or that, like, if you actually take some of those challenges that Hitchens does, and not the ones that are the most popular, but you go into like go pick out a deep cut from Hitchens, present it to a church in Middle America, and you will really upset a lot of believers. So they haven't thought about those issues. It's easy to kind of get lost with the dialectic that happens online between skeptics and Christians, because a lot of these Christians here, they've been trying to like find ways to poke holes in Hitchens' arguments and these kinds of things. But yeah, anyway, that's a digression. I think that once you've moved from that point, you get those points, and then you start looking at both sides. For me, even atheists in the angry stage, I could at least understand their passion. But the Christians that were making these they didn't have sound rational arguments, and then when they would get upset, it was just defensive, and it seemed desperate and clingy, and would ultimately they'd be grinding, just like stomping their feet and like, no, I'm not budging. I'm not going to acknowledge your point, and then they just start calling you a sinner.
That's all they got. That's all they got.
Well, and that's why the like we on our channel we have a ton of shit we're working on and planning and all that. But one of the things, like as far as like pre-recorded content that I've been working on, I've bounced this off of actually like Magna Bosco and Pine Creek Doug and like how to, like what's the best way to do this? How do I attack this? I've started so the city I'm in is called the City of Churches, and there is literally a fucking church on every goddamn corner. And there is a directory. There's an online directory of all the churches that have subscribed to this directory, which there's a fucking ton of them. And I've started to call, email, message all of the pastors of these churches. And I officially have 4 now that I have on the books that I'm going to do one-on-one interviews, like not live on YouTube, but recorded. Like awesome. I have a person that's going to be the cameraman. And we're going to go through like street epistemology / Socratic method. I know those blend together, but that type of feel. And I cannot wait. My first one's on the 28th.
That sounds exciting. That sounds like a great project.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait.
28th.
So my first one's in 3 days.
Monday.
Yeah. And then we'll keep going and on was it? It's on my wife's schedule. Hold on, she's off. So on Thursdays is my day to go into the directory and keep emailing and messaging and calling, and it's amazing. I was talking to Anthony about this. It's amazing the response I've received so far. Positive.
Is Anthony going to be on the show with you?
Well, he's going to be coaching me from the background.
Oh, okay. And you're talking about Anthony Magna Bosco, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay.
And it's amazing the response I've got from pastors so far. And I remember I was talking to Anthony. I was like, I'm really shocked on how many of these pastors are actually willing to sit down and do a one-on-one, like recorded interview. And the only thing I can connect it to is, if we go through the most recent Pew reports and Pew research and the statistics and all that, people are leaving here in America anyway, are leaving Christianity in droves. And I think these pastors have finally come to a point where, like, you know what? we don't like these atheists, but we have to engage. We have to engage, and we have to show our people, the Christians, that we're not afraid to engage and have these conversations. So my hope is, as I engage these pastors, my next request is going to be, after these interviews, is, if you were cool with that interview, and I'm going to be like super cool with them, and I'll ask tough questions, but respectful and cordial and all that, is after that, like, how would you feel about me coming and filming a worship service? Like, can I come in and observe? Then once I observe, okay, I've been here now. I've talked to you. I observed. I didn't say anything to anybody. I didn't ask anybody anything. Now, after I've observed and I've been respectful, do you care that the next time I come, I'll observe and record the worship service and everything, but then after the fact, if I just grab a random, 1, 2, or 3 people and just interview them, would you be okay with that?
That one, I'm going to predict right now, that one is going to make that particular person it's going to make most of those ministers nervous, because it's one thing if they're representing it, because it'll depend on the denomination that you go to. Like if you deal with like a Catholic priest, it's going to be business as usual for the most part. I've talked to Catholics and a few Catholic priests, and they're usually very almost bureaucratic. It's almost like an administrative position. So it's very there's actually, I can kind of understand the appeal of Catholicism in that sense. They're very secure in their structure. But with some of the non-denominational ones, or even some of the more the smaller Presbyterian or Protestant ones, like say like the Nazarenes or something like that, some of the smaller holiness movement ones, they can get a little defensive. My a friend of mine actually has left the church recently, and he's spent the last five or 6 years with the Reformed Church, which is pretty. His is kind of politically right wing, hardcore fundamentalist Calvinists. And when he started having questions about it, he and I would discuss it like after work. We've been working with each other for a long time, and we had a relationship where we got along, but we didn't agree about anything. And so we would talk about, but we both like talking about politics and religion, which are things you're not supposed to talk about at work, but we didn't care. We would do that. And then over time, I don't know if I wore him down or if I just planted enough seeds or kind of challenged his imagination, where he started thinking about those things and then asking his pastor about them, and his pastor whiffed on him. He'd give him like a book from like William Lane Craig or like Tim Keller or one of these guys, hand him this, read this, and then come back and ask me questions. And then when he'd have questions, this preacher would kind of ghost him. And I was like, yeah, then it's time to go. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, he's not comfortable talking with you, and every time you're there, you're just going to be a source of insecurity for him. So he's going to continue to push you away. That's how this works in these congregations.
Well, and that's when I build up to, and I love that you said that, because you like everything you just said there was dead on, and how I foresee things panning out. And if we get to the point where it's like, okay, I've been here 2, 3, 4 times, and observed and had respectful interviews with you, do you care if I have interviews with a few of your patrons, after the service? That's where I want that to be on film as well.
Yeah.
Because as soon as it's like, well, no, I don't know, because I agree with you. That's probably the direction it's going to go. I don't.
I hope you don't. Yeah, I hope you don't mind if I give you some unsolicited advice, because I haven't done this kind of project before, and you're pushing it on it. I think if you ask if they've agreed to a one-on-one and they're enthusiastic to do it, if you bring up, hey, how would you feel about co-moderating with me a panel discussion with people you select from your congregation, and you join, and the two of us can get, ask them questions, and then you kind of pattern. Basically, it's not so much like direct questions designed to make him uncomfortable, but just sort of getting there, feel like, hey, about this issue, how do you all feel, and then go from there. I think at that point they might feel a little bit better about that. And I mean, it might end up causing problems between them later on, but that's between them.
Yeah,
that's for them to deal with later.
Anything in church will cause problems. You know that.
But it'll be the ones that minister thinks are probably the strongest in whatever theological or dogmatic approach that they have, and he'll probably end up picking people that he thinks work well together. So it's like, okay, you're going to get from him sort of like, this is him presenting what he thinks are probably going to be the most responsive, possibly the most not challenging, but the most insightful people in his group. so that could be kind of insightful, because then you could kind of like, depending on the questions you end up picking, you could end up throwing them some curveballs and see where it goes.
Actually, I'm glad you said that. I actually like that, because if I put the ball in his court, so if I go for the interview and I just do the observation, I don't talk to anybody, you know, and I just do the observation, then I come back to him and I propose what you just talked about. The beautiful thing about that is we have a I'm going to say survey, but survey is a terrible term for it. But we have a form or a set of questions that have to do with deeply held beliefs, you know, and why we believe what we believe, that we're going to have these pastors fill out beforehand, and that we can go back and refer to those questions. And that's something where, if they've done that and we handle that very respectfully, you know, the first time around, and say, you know, is it okay if we sit down and we go through these questions? Like they don't have to do it before the interview like you did, but we just go through these questions, and you're there, you're present, and I'm there, like you suggested, and we go through these together. You know, you can handpick whoever you want. Can we go through these questions?
Yeah,
I think that'd be a home run.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of, because I think through that, it's a point that I've made, because I've known about it growing up in different churches. But if I present it to YouTube Christians and say, you know, if you go into a church and you talk about one theological issue within your congregation, it can be a small congregation of only about 45 to 55 people on average every Sunday, you will get 45 to 55 separate opinions about it. Now they might all agree. You'll get some that will quote chapter and verse from either the rule book or, you know, from whatever scripture they happen to favor. But if you give them hypotheticals and then kind of push them on it, you're going to get different people will start to fall away in different ways. And like the homosexuality thing is one of those things, because you will end up finding one person like, I don't think God condemns people for being gay. And they'll be afraid to say it, depending on the kind of church they're in, but they probably fully believe that. They're like, yeah, I know that the church says it's a sin, and it's probably a sin even if you desire it, but I don't think God condemns people for that. I think there's a lot of Christians that don't think that Jesus condemns for that, but they're afraid to say it.
How can God condemn what he makes, what he creates?
Well, they might say that as well, and then they end up at loggerheads with other Christians in their church, or with the minister who's throwing Bible verses talking about, no, this, you know.
Well, Sydney, he does not condemn what he makes. Man has chosen to pick a wicked path that has led to sin.
I see. So it's man's fault.
So
God creates man, and man makes bad decisions. I see.
Correct.
I see.
Thus
How convenient,
the Lord.
Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, it's our fault that he gave us free will.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly it.
But if you end up getting into that, then you end up running into those problems where it's like, okay, so you have a being that is all powerful, perfect, morally perfect, creates beings with free will. A byproduct of their free will is evil. That somehow exists in the same universe where there's an all good God that creates everything. Okay. How did an all-knowing, all-powerful being create something that's capable of, one, taking him by surprise, two, doing something he didn't plan for, and three, totally against his nature?
No, Jefferson. That's where you get it all wrong, Jefferson. God's ways are higher than our ways. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter any single way you try to wrap your human brain around it. His ways are higher than our ways.
You retreated right back into the mystery argument faster than I would have thought. He's a mystery. Oh, is he mysterious? Yes, I would agree. An all good thing that knows everything and can do everything possible creates beings that can do evil, something that this thing doesn't clearly can't see coming, but needs to happen in order for Jesus' salvation narrative to work. Like, you see, like, it's just a rolling ball of contradictions. Like, everything just keeps canceling itself out.
Isn't it written somewhere in the Christian Bible that God created evil? Or in one of somewhere.
Yeah, that's always the
I, God,
controversy.
created evil.
I bring calamity. Well, it does say I create evil, I create good, and I create evil.
My thing with the whole omni, whoever the fuck came up with the omni shit, I still don't understand. But the whole omni shit is, let's just deflate it. Let's just deflate it. You cannot be all merciful and all just at the same goddamn time.
That's a classic contradiction that I love.
You can't do it.
That is consistently one topic that I get a lot of entertainment listening to Christians, especially when Christians are talking amongst each other about it. And there'll be that one that'll be like, "Hey, atheists are listening. This is inside baseball, right? This stays inside the country club. You know, this isn't meant for the outsiders to hear." And it's like, no, go on. I'm listening. I'm just popcorn. Yeah, because I love that one. Like, yeah, no, go on, explain how does he spare us the things that we deserve, and then provide us with something that we totally didn't earn, totally don't deserve. Like, he's perfectly moral and perfectly just. Like, go, and it can't be done.
Nope.
You know, it really bothers me, and it still bothers me even since I read it in the history books, is that the Black Death of 1347 or whenever it was pretty much decimated 50% of Europe. And I would have thought that the whole God story would have just disappeared after that. God came and brought this plague. He killed us all. We don't know how to fix it. God's useless. And then in 1350, there would have been the end of Christianity. But no, how the hell did it survive? How the fuck did it survive?
I think that people hold on to certain religious beliefs the same way we hold on to the idea that we're, like, individually, we tend to think that we're going to live forever.
It's like the Jews in the Holocaust. Once the Holocaust happens, that's the end of God. Done. You've got nothing.
I think
weak-ass God is useless.
Well, that's always the weird thing about that is that for Christians, they don't see that as being, they wouldn't see something like the Holocaust as being an indication of how God came up short. They see it as an indication. They use it to reinforce the belief, and it's usually a misanthropic one, of how bad people are and how much more obvious it is that we need a God.
Yeah, but if people are so bad and God is so useless and people are so much stronger than God and what people do counts and what God cannot do doesn't count, then what use is God?
Well, they don't know. It's not that God's useless. They believe that God wouldn't create moist robots, as Frank Turek calls it. He doesn't want us being mindless automatons. We have to we have to choose God willingly, even though the last time he left choice up to two individuals, they ate forbidden fruit that a talking snake convinced them was good for them. So it's a weird story. But generally, the idea is human beings need to be able to choose so that we can choose God that makes
Someone's getting feedback.
Oh, sorry, that might be me.
I think it's Troy.
I think it's Troy.
Troy?
Oh, am I doing something wrong?
Yeah, no, you've got feedback in the back of your mic.
No worries.
You just get it.
Either mute or shut
No,
off.
just mute.
Okay. Mute's good. Mute's good.
Well,
okay. Or shut off the other whatever's playing in the background.
Troy, you probably have the YouTube playing in the background, so either mute or mute the stream.
I don't know. This is my phone, but everything else is off.
Oh, you sound better now.
Could be your
Did
mic.
it go away?
Yep.
Yeah, it's not that annoying, really.
Maybe it's feedback.
Yeah, we can still hear you. It's good.
Now it's better.
Well, what I was thinking was that it's not lost on any of us. The irony of that gullibility is kind of a sinful action that, but replete and all these different stories and myths and allegories and all that stuff is just the notion of you better buy into this because this is your only path to getting out of this world alive, and yet at the same time, it's talking about, gullibility as being problematic.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, did you guys happen to watch Tom Rabbit released a video where Darth Dawkins is talking to Taylor Nicole?
Yeah, I saw that.
And he lays out kind of his theology perfectly. He's just like, he's asking her if she's really a Christian. He says something to the effect like, do you believe in God? Do you believe that he's the creator? Do you believe that you need to repent to Jesus Christ, because if you don't, you're going to go to hell?
Mm-hmm.
And then he says something else again, like you realize that it's important that if you
Troy,
don't
you
do
wanna mute?
something.
Yeah, Troy, just mute if you're not. If you're not talking, mute, and then when you want to talk, unmute. And it's all good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it was interesting they did that, because I get the feeling that I really got the impression from that like I'm pretty sure for Darth Dawkins, it's all about condemnation for him, like the fact that he's terrified of being punished for being bad. It's not about a loving God. It's not about a relationship with God. It's about bending the knee and accepting, submitting to the will of this powerful deity warlord thing that is going to send you to a place of eternal conscious torment if you don't take his side.
He's already
Yes, and why
he's already
why
chosen.
is that?
He's already chosen his place in hell by his behavior, so he's done.
And why is that man's position? And I don't ask that like freely because I already know the answer. Is because that's what he desires. He desires that anybody that he speaks to, anybody that he has a conversation with, will bow down and submit to his argument, his conversation, his personality, his demeanor. Because
and if they don't, they deserve to burn in hell.
Yes, yes, and he is and I said it live on our channel 2 nights ago. He is a narcissistic, self-absorbed asshole, and there's no other way. There's no other way to explain the way that man behaves.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it nails it pretty much.
Well, from my observation, I am a counselor by trade. I teach at a technical college. So whenever he talks about, you need, 3 or 4 community college lectures, don't give me that. I'm kind of laughing under that because I could give him that. But for me, it's his. I don't have that many access to grinding with a person's own existential disposition that they need to believe in something, even false beliefs about afterlife, but it's political for me. And, when he talks about the mythologies of psychotherapy, that it's a fraud, I take that quite personally, and he's actually doing damage to people. But I agree with your assessment. He's got 3 or 4 speculative personality disorders, antisocial, narcissists come to mind, and that's pretty intransigent. You're not going to really get a person very often to address those issues, which makes them ever more problematic.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that you, I love what you said and what you brought up, because that's been one of my biggest beefs with he and like a LPP, and there's a couple of these other, I'll just say it, douchebag, supposed Christians on YouTube, is they dismiss mental health. They dismiss abuse. They dismiss trauma. And for me as an individual that I've experienced all of those, and that I still struggle and I still have that fight every single day of my life, when I hear that, I do become a little bit combative, because it's you don't know, bro. Like whoever that person is, you have no idea what it's like to walk in my shoes. You have no idea what it's like to live my life and try to navigate those things and still try to be and attempt to be the happiest and the most authentic and the best version of myself every single fucking day, amidst all of the pain and the trauma and the abuse and the mental illness shit that I've had to go through. Like, fuck you.
Absolutely.
Like, you have no idea. And if there's any way to get me from 0 to 100 in about 2 seconds, that's the fucking way to do it.
Have you guys noticed, and Troy, I'd be curious to hear your input on this if you've actually seen it, but there've been a couple videos I've heard where I don't know if somebody has tried to goad him with something kind of like psychoanalysis or has encouraged him to seek counseling or whatever, and he's gone off on some tangents and he gets really worked up, and it's pretty clear he's made some statements where it seems pretty obvious that he maybe spent some time on the couch. And if he did, it was like he treated it like, someone with a demon would treat, if there actually were such demons, would treat an exorcism. It's just that, listening to him talk about it is like listening to a Scientologist, like, talk about psychology and psychotherapy. He's just rabidly anti-therapy, anti-psychology. It's of no good. But he talks about it like he's got a grudge against it. So
I have, and I've heard him a number of times, even with people who work in the field. He condemns their career exploration and performance and service. And then with people who have issues like post-traumatic stress, he goes after them too. Basically, all you need to do is find the Lord. And he does it with such a tone of confidence in his voice, which, is a component of his narcissism. But the fact that he doesn't withhold it is frightening to me, because there are people who listen to him. Yep. And his minions go out and become his disciples and start preaching his stuff. So, yeah, it's pretty alarming. And it's kind of why I take off my therapy hat and I get kind of mean in some of my retorts, because it comes from a place, like Nate said, that seems very personal. And, you might as well go around shooting people, because that's kind of the outcome you might start getting.
Well, it just seems so pathetic to see guys trafficking in ideas about therapy that, I mean, I remember when those ideas started changing, they started making a concerted effort to get people out of those stereotypes in like the early 80s, and these guys are like stuck in the 70s when it comes to this kind of stuff. It's just like, oh, well, if you go to therapy, it means you're weak, or you're admitting that there's something wrong with you. And what you need to really admit to, there is something wrong with you, is that we're all born in sin, and if you just turn it over to Jesus, you're gonna see a change in your life. And it's like, and if they don't, I know plenty of people that did that exact same thing. Watched them when I was a kid, grew up in churches, watching these adults with kids of their own, turning things over to Jesus, hoping things would get better, and they didn't. They got worse. And then when the church couldn't explain what went wrong, their families fell apart. They left the church. Things blew up. And when they came back, distraught and asking questions like, what, did any of those church leaders suggest couples counseling, therapy, go see a psychologist?
Pray harder.
Pray harder. Give the church, the last church that I was involved. Yep. Make sure you're tithing. Make sure you're 10% gross, not net. That was always a big thing. Yep. So it's just that, and I think that's probably the reason why there's been so much drifting away from it, because there's enough stories like that, and there's still enough churches out there like that where, when the chips are down and push comes to shove, and you start asking those difficult questions, a lot of people, especially, it's not necessarily the people that you develop a culture or a kind of a community within those groups, so you can develop good, some solid friendships there. But when it comes to the leadership and stuff, if it gets too hard for them, they'll fold, because at the end of the day, they have to stick by this kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of a corporate line. They have to kind of do that, just heed the company bylines, and they're gonna be, no, Jesus has got to be it. Jesus has got to be enough for you. And it's like,
Jesus is the answer. Right?
And odds are. And most of those people are probably, a lot of them, and that's actually something that came up with another, someone else that I knew. For them, it was like, no, just turn it over to Jesus. Turn it over to Jesus, and all our friends are on drugs, not like hard drugs, but they're either on painkillers, or they're on anti-anxiety meds, or Wellbutrin plus, and usually a decent amount of alcohol on the side too. They don't talk about what they're getting treatment for. But when somebody asks them like, hey, I'm really struggling with this, and they're like, oh, well, I don't know what you're going through, but just pray. And it's like, okay, what you pray plus you drink a bottle of wine a night and take Wellbutrin. So what's going on there? You know?
Right.
So yeah, it's bad. A lot of hang-ups, a lot of bad habits in that group.
What's the future for Christianity online?
Atheism.
It is, isn't it?
I kind of think it is. I mean, if Oz is right, and he goes, it is Oz, right, that we've been talking about?
Yeah.
I think if he's right, and if he's talking to if he's initiating contact with some of these pastors in his town, and they're kind of enthusiastic to maybe meet and greet and start this kind of dialogue, I think, I think that the next phase of Christianity is more relevant if they have someone that they can talk with. They've been spending generations talking at people, and most people have been polite, and religion's not something that you talk about around the dinner table or at work. So they'll listen to the pastor, and if they've got questions or criticisms, they go home and they keep it to themselves, or they only talk to it with their close friends and family. And now it's like, no, you can't do that anymore. Now you got to be transparent. So that age is over. And they owe, I mean, even the Protestants basically are kind of on the hook for the
That's Lucifer.
Lucifer.
Hello, Lucifer. Finally, we meet.
Is he on the? Oh yeah, he's on the boom, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a little guy. Is that a ball python? Nope.
Yeah, he's a baby. I just got him like 2 or 3 days ago.
Okay.
Oh, that's a cute one.
Cute. Yeah, he's
That is cute.
Listen to us.
Just don't get 27 of them. You're like, nah, I have 50. It's all cool. No bad jokes. Sorry. No, it's been a great talk, Hoss. Like, this has been.
Wow,
thank you.
It's been great. But we are approaching what 2.5 hours. We've passed 2.5 hours of stream time.
Do you want to call it?
Yeah, I'm gonna call it. But I'll keep the room open. We'll keep the room open. I'll just take off. I'll take it off the stream.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you all for joining us. Don't leave everybody in the room, because I will be not shutting it down at all. Let's just get rid of the live stream.
All right. Well, take care. Nice to talk to you all.
Yeah, nice talking to you.
Okay. Nice. We'll catch him again.